1-800.
I'm Jim Deedlow, owner here of WJOB, former morning host, kind of still here. And if there's anything I like to do, it is to profile people who have come from the region and have done well and have done important work. And we have one of those on the line right now, and that is Korellis Reuther. Karen, how are you today?
Hi, Jim. I'm doing great. Hello from Boston. From
Boston. That wasn't always Boston, though, was it? You grew up right down the street. Tell us about it.
You better believe it. Well, you know, I'm a proud Hammond graduate. Grew up in South Hammond. As you were given the traffic report, I realized I grew up right off of the Calumet Avenue exit. Proud Hammond High graduate, studied at Purdue, worked in the mills, and then made my way out to Boston for a job after graduating.
So let's give it some context. We'll come back at the end of this, and we'll go into some of the local stuff and the inland steel and all, and the Korellis roofing and that kind of thing. But you left. You went to Purdue. You went down to Lafayette, correct? What'd you get a degree in down there?
So my degree was in industrial design, but that's not exactly where I started. So I was, I didn't have the greatest SAT scores, Jim. My math scores were pretty dismal. And I remember a wonderful conversation with my dad, George. And, he said, well, honey, it looks like it's a state school for you. And luckily, that state school turned out to be Purdue. And I started majoring in architecture. I thought, roofers need architects. But I was always interested sketching, drawing cars and products, hair dryers, shampoo bottles, all of that. At one point during my sophomore year at Purdue, a professor asked to speak to me after class, not always a great sign. And he said, have you noticed your drawings are a little different than the rest of the class? They're drawing nature and flowers, and you're drawing hair dryers and shampoo bottles and toasters. And he said, have you ever heard of industrial design? And I said, what is it? And he said, well, it's like an architect for product. And I remember that exact moment. It was in a building that doesn't exist anymore down in West Lafayette, the Michael Golden Labs. And I said to him, you can be that? And he said, yes. And I've never looked back.
That took you out west. Tell us about that.
It took me out east first. So I went out east, and, back then the computer industry was really booming. Computers were, it sounds like an ancient story, but it wasn't that long ago. Computers were starting to make their way out of the big computer rooms and onto desktops, and industrial designers were hired to design the objects, the ones that we know so well today, the monitors and screens in front of us, the keyboards, the printers, mice, to really start to design for the person who was going to be using this. And so I spent my first 12 years in the computer industry for a company called Wang Laboratories. And another company called Digital Equipment Corporation, both large Boston-based founder entrepreneurial companies.
How'd you get to Nike and Reebok?
Well, the story is really quite interesting. So when I was at Digital, I got the project of a lifetime, Jim. I got sent over to the south of France to a trade show to show computers of the future, which our group had designed. And I met my husband, Dieter, there. He also worked for Digital Equipment. He's from Germany. And so from Boston, I went to Munich, Germany for 7 years. And that's where I started to focus on aspects of color, material, finish, print, and pattern. And Nike found me in a little studio in Munich and recruited me to Portland, Oregon, to join as a design director.
How many years there?
I was there for 12 years.
Did you like designing shoes for men that you made smaller for women?
I didn't like that, right? I didn't, obviously, I didn't like that. I was not specifically designing shoes. I was working at first on equipment, watches, eyewear, and then really focused on the color, material, print pattern aspect of the footwear for about 10 years. So, no, I didn't. I was creative director for women's for a couple years as well. And that's sort of when that, insidious little earworm of Shrink It and Pink It first landed on my radar. And I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now.
We're talking to Karen Korellis Reuther. She has written a book. It's called Man Made, and we'll get to that in just a second. But she is one of our own. Grew up right around down here. George Korellis started Korellis Roofing. Pete Korellis is her brother. And it's kind of cool to see what people in the region have gone on to do, even if they went on to live somewhere else. So let's continue with this. Karen, you're at Nike. How do you wind up at Reebok?
Well, living in Portland, Oregon was wonderful, but it was a long way from home. It was a long way from Chicago. My parents. It was a long way from my in-laws in Germany, and so we were still trying to get back east, whether that would be Chicago or Boston again. And I landed in Boston, and I started to consult. So I was consulting to the industry, working with Puma and Timberland and Vans and the North Face, and really enjoying that consulting work. A job came up basically for a chief design officer at Reebok, and it was right down the street from where I was living. Reebok is one of the Boston-based companies. So if you know the sneaker industry in the U.S., you're either in Portland, Oregon, or in Boston, Massachusetts. And Reebok was in Boston. And it was one of those brands that I had always cheered for. When you work in that competitive industry, there are very few other brands you cheer for. But Reebok was one of those brands. And it attracted me because many, many years ago, it was the first brand that made a shoe for women. It made the Freestyle, which was for aerobics.
So, obviously, you go through Purdue, you go through working in computers, you're at Nike, and then you're at Reebok living out east. And something is working on you. What is that when it comes to designing for women?
Well, what started to work on me was a statistic that I read, and it was that only 18% of practicing industrial designers, which I am, were in practice in the U.S. Less than 25% of licensed architects in the U.S. were women, and probably around 12% of mechanical engineers were women. And so it really shined a light. That one statistic shined a light on me that said, we are living in a world designed by men for men. And so whether or not we get more women into design or we start to design for more women, we have to shift something. And that's what really got me focused and started my research into it's not just the sneakers that they scale down from a man's size and color it a stereotypical color. It's a lot of products. And that goes from insulting to deadly.
You know this area, steel mill, roofers, kind of hard guy based. There's people listening right now that may be saying, well, okay, it's designed for men and women just haven't gotten there yet. And they're maybe even at some level kind of okay with that. But there's a danger factor here. And I think I didn't realize it until I read parts of your book. And I saw the one statistic of women are 17% more likely to die in an auto accident. Why is that?
Well, the reason is that we do not test with female crash test dummies to receive a 5-star NCAP safety rating. So we're testing with, not to minimize it, but we're testing with a Shrink It and Pink It crash test dummies that's built around a male anatomy. And our biomechanics are different, right? We're built different. Our structure is different. And not only that, when we do use that shrinked and pinked version to test our cars, Jim, we're not testing them behind the wheel. So there are tests for women's size crash test dummies in the passenger seat, but they're not accurate to our bodies, and we're not testing behind the wheel. And, part of my research uncovered that, for many, many years, even as recently, I believe, as 2021, about 2 million more women get their license every year. So it results in cars that are designed for the male anatomy, resulting in 17% more death and 73% more injury as a result of a car crash.
Any other examples of the built world designed more with men in mind and not women?
Yeah, so where do you want to start?
I know. I read. I was like, okay, just pick one. I'll pick one. We went on vacation, and we wound up staying in a hotel one night. And my wife is like, was reading your book. I said, oh, here it is. She goes, what's that? And she goes, here's an example. Look at this, the shower. A woman would never design the shower to come straight down because she has her hair. She doesn't want to get wet. She wants it coming out of the wall. That's just a minor example. You give one.
Sure. So, the continuum is insulting to deadly. So I'll give you one that's insulting. So imagine that you go to work every day. I look at the trades, the construction industry, and you're provided equipment that was designed, apparel even, clothing that was designed for a male body. So I don't know about you, Jim, but I bet you've shown up to a party either overdressed or underdressed. Is that true?
Usually underdressed, but yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, that has happened to most of us. And that's something that we called enclosed cognition. And I know when that has happened to me, I haven't brought my best self to that event. I feel a little bit left out. I'm not, feeling comfortable in my own body. Now, that's a party, but imagine showing up to work every day in something that feels like a costume that wasn't designed for you, whether it's a safety vest or a police officer's pants that were designed for a men's body, or a shirt, firefighter's gloves. That all adds up. And that's something that I would say goes from insulting to uncomfortable and oftentimes dangerous.
You talk about the first 6 female astronauts, and you talk about the spacewalk that was supposed to be 2 women, and it couldn't be because they didn't have enough smaller spacesuits. Talk about that.
Well, the first spacewalk, where it was going to be all female, was not able to take place because they had not equipped the space station with a suit that fit both women. And so one woman had to be swapped out. And it was a few years later that it was possible for all female to do a spacewalk. So there's a couple of things, right? How difficult is it to really source something that would fit a woman, especially if she's in space? But for whatever reason, that decision was made, and it wasn't possible. The other for me, Jim, is that there are moments, and you know this, you have a daughter. There are moments where when women's minds are brought together, we see the world in a different way, right? So I think that our world had to wait to benefit from what 2 female astronauts could do in a spacewalk. Now, we've had about 400 spacewalks. There's probably just been less than 10 that have been all female. And so I think that it's that number, right? It's that quantity that makes you realize, like, we are just not building yet for a woman's world.
So the book is called Man Made. I saw you on national TV. I know you're on a kind of a book tour right now. It just came out recently. What could you say to the average person in the region why they would go out and buy it?
Well, I'm hoping that there's something in the book for everybody. If you're a consumer, if you're someone who uses these products, which we all are, and wears these products, especially if you're women, it's your right, it's your human right to have product that keeps you safe, where you feel hospitable, where it's hospitable and comfortable. Insist on product that fits you. In this day and age, I would say that we can let companies know when products aren't working for us, but we can also let companies know when they are. And so there are many examples in the book of firms, especially in the area of the trades and the military, were starting to design products for women. And I would say insist, right? Insist on products that fit. Be unapologetically demanding. If you're someone there that wants to go into design, architecture, engineering, which I hope, many young women will do, stay in that field, right? It's not always easy, but your opportunity to invent what's possible, to invent product that fits not just women but everyone better is incredible. And I have to put in a plug for Purdue. There's no better school to study that, I think, in the US than Purdue. And then if you're a business leader, if you're a CEO, if you're an investor, invest in women. Right? It's proven fact. We are 50% of the population. There are 4 billion of us on the planet. I want to encourage people that they can bank on women.
Adriana Alvarez is our producer here. I'm sure that you like the sound of Invest in Women. This is actually her podcast network. She talked me into it. I kind of didn't want to do it. I didn't want to take on the project. 22-year-old woman coming into kind of a male-dominated podcast industry. What would you tell Adriana?
Well, I would tell Adriana to be really confident in her voice, to try not to be the only woman in the room. Look around. Who else can you bring to the table? To ask for help. And to know that there are so many of us who have been through this labyrinth that are there cheering her on and there to support her. Also to trust her gut. It's not always all the data that brings you to a productive or profitable solution. It's a combination. It's a combination of the rigor of research and your gut instinct. And I would tell her to trust both.
Adriana, how'd you like that?
I mean, I would definitely say that I agree a lot with her, especially when she said to be confident in your own voice, because that is probably the most important thing. If you are able to have great communicative skills and you are able to carry yourself and just be confident in how you talk to people and how you get information across, that's probably one of the greatest life skills you can have, because when you have a great foundation of that, you can build on top of that. And I see that a lot in a lot of different individuals, especially with not only just in the world of communication, but also in other fields and a lot of male-dominated fields as well in the workforce, that there are women that if they are able to hold themselves and carry themselves well, then they can go very far in their careers.
Two region women, one who has demonstrated that, gone very far in her career, and then another one starting out a podcast network I didn't really want, but here it is, and it's growing way faster than I thought it would have. So can we go back to, before we head out, Karen, you grew up in the Calumet region. You grew up with George and Harriet, and you saw your dad working to build a roofing company, and then you went on to Inland Steel and worked there for a little while. What do you carry out of the region that you were able to carry into your career and become successful?
Well, I didn't follow in my father's footsteps, but I maintain the deepest respect for the trades. The world can't operate without them. And I want to say that we need not only more people in the trades, we need more women in the trades. I think what I learned most from both of my parents is to believe in what you're doing, to be kind, to listen, to understand, and to keep your feet on the ground. I never wanted to leave Hammond, Jim. If you talk to, if you talk to my brother, if my parents were still alive, I was the kid that never wanted to leave home. I loved Hammond and I loved the region. And so it wasn't always easy as I moved to Boston, to Munich, to Portland. But I always kept my feet on the ground, understood where I came from, and made family wherever I landed. Their lessons are with me every single day.
What did you learn at Inland Steel?
Wow. Well, I learned a lot of things at Inland Steel. I learned what it takes to make things, right? Like what it really takes to build things. And I know that we're living in this digital world now, and we speak a lot about AI. But the fact of the matter is, you and I are both wearing clothes that were designed for our bodies. We're sitting at desks and in chairs. We're driving cars. The built world, the physical built world, is still very much part of our lives. And that's what I loved. You know, my first job was in the number 3 cold strip where they were making the coils of steel for Detroit. And the scale of what that took just made me respect what you needed to learn and what you needed to know if you were going to make product. And I also learned that if we're going to mass produce, if we're going to be filling our world with things, those things need to be thoughtful, and they need to be respectful to the people and the planet.
Anything else you want to say to your hometown?
Oh, my goodness. You know, Hammond, I love you. I acknowledge Hammond in my book. I thank the city for being at its core blue collar. And along with my parents, Hammond raised me. So thank you, Hammond.
Man-made. You can get it just about everywhere. Praise for Man-Made. It is a powerful and urgent call to action for the health and safety of half of our population. It's time we rethink the male body ideal and build a world that includes us all. That was written by a female doctor. Thanks a lot, Karen.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. I'm Jim Deedlow, WJOB.